Why isn't my name on the screen? Can you put my name on the screen? While he does that, welcome to I Know Lots. My name is Dan Heroy, there we go, thank you. My name is Dan Heroy. I'm here with Bob Franzoni today. Good to see you, Bob.
Nice to see you, Dan.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you very much.
Glad
to be here.
I want to start out with just getting a little bit of your background in American history.
I just loved history in high school. I loved history in college. Hated to know what the dates were, but loved to understand where people lived in that time, how they lived. And then my son and I ended up reenacting the Revolutionary War.
Just the two of you?
Just the two of us with other groups, with a group.
Okay.
And so we reenact regiments that are actually in the Revolutionary War.
Okay. Now, did you guys act on behalf of the United States or?
Well, I do the. Well, of course, the Americans were the enemies back then. I recommend.
Well, I don't know.
Depending how you look at it.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at it that way.
Okay, so I do the Americans. My son does the Americans, the British, and the French.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. That's at the same time. How does that work?
Different times.
Okay.
Of course, my wife's related to Benedict Arnold, so he has a way he can switch around like that.
Wow. So, and you guys are still allowed in the country?
Yeah. Of course, without Benedict Arnold, we wouldn't have won the Revolutionary War.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. We're learning stuff already. Well, I do have some questions I
Sure.
wrote down just to get us going here. Now, we're talking about the Revolutionary War, but I'm also interested in the Civil War. So,
the Civil War was actually an extension of the Revolutionary War.
Okay, goes along with my first question. What are the main differences between the Revolutionary War and the Civil War?
Well, the Revolutionary War, we're fighting against the British for freedom. In the Civil War, we're fighting its extension because in the Constitution, they never allow for freedom of the blacks or slaves. So in the Civil War, we're fighting for Southern freedom and the right to do what they want or have slaves. So,
were there any other differences? Because I know a lot of people have a hard time keeping track between what the Revolutionary War was and what the Civil War was.
Well, the two obvious differences, one we're fighting against British.
Which one were we fighting against the British?
The Revolutionary War. And in the Civil War, we're fighting against the South in our own country. So that's the basic difference. But you always wonder if they allowed the freedom of the slaves in the Constitution and in the Declaration of Independence, that if there would have been a Civil War.
Okay. Wow, that's an interesting question. I guess we'll never know the answer to that one.
Never know.
Now, was the biggest reason for the Civil War to free the Indians?
I would say probably not.
Now, why do you say that?
Because the Indians are free in the West already, so they're probably freeing the slaves.
Well,
probably more free.
Well, you might say they were free, but I don't think they would have considered themselves free under the circumstances.
You're talking about what kind of Indians?
Native American Indians.
What kind of Native? What Native Americans?
Cherokee or Seminole.
Well, the Cherokees actually were
Shawnee.
Cherokee were actually in the Andrew Jackson era were brought out west on the Trail of Tears. A lot were killed and died needlessly. I was saying the eastern battles where Civil War was fought in the eastern side of the United States, there are probably some tribes there, but the Plains Indians probably didn't really feel the effect till later on after the Civil War.
Okay.
So actually in the Revolutionary War, there are more Indians affected than the Civil War.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, who won the Civil War?
Depends where you live.
Okay. Now,
I've been down south, and the South still thinks they won.
They think they won?
They think they won.
Okay, now...
I hate to tell them, the North won.
Well, see, do you think maybe you're biased because you live in the North?
No.
Now, what facts do we have presented that say the North won instead of the South?
Well, I think the biggest fact is that Lee surrendered at Appomattox to the North, and we have one United States right now. If the South won...
Now, how heavily was that documented? Do we know that happened?
Yeah, there are some famous artists there. The guy traveled around, was painting things, yeah.
But I can paint anything I want, and I could say it's fact.
You could.
But that doesn't make it fact.
No.
The fact is,
if we had two governments right now, there would be a Southern United States and Northern United States run by two separate governments.
See, some people would say we have two separate governments right now, a Democratic government and a Republican government.
That could be true.
So, you could say we're still fighting the Civil War.
Oh, we've been fighting Civil War for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, during the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yes.
Now, there's a famous situation here, and I want to find out if this is fact or if it's just a legend. It says George Washington and his troops were preparing to go into battle, and a cloud had settled so that the British troops couldn't see where they were in Gettysburg there, and they were able to get all the troops positioned so that they could win the battle.
So when's the last time you read a history book?
Read a book. It's been a while, but I've seen some documentaries. I've talked to a lot of people, experts like yourself.
Sure. Well, I would say,
was that a legend or is that fact?
Well, I would say the Battle of Gettysburg was not George Washington. He would been dead quite a while. He died in 1803, and the Gettysburg's 1862. So I would say George Washington had quite a feat come back to fight in Civil War in Gettysburg.
Right, which is why most people thought that we were going to lose. And they said Washington, there's no way him and his men could win because it would have been quite a feat to win that battle.
The Battle of Gettysburg. It would have been quite a feat for George Washington to win the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah, but did that happen? Did the clouds settle and they got to move in on the British and it was one of the biggest battles in United States history?
I don't believe the clouds settled in. Probably, I would say that you need to think about who the right general was in the Gettysburg.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it depends if you're thinking north or south. I mean, were you for General George Washington or were you for General Robert E. Lee?
Well, I would say that I would be for George Washington, except George Washington was related to Robert E. Lee, which you probably didn't know.
So when they met in battle, it must have been awkward.
It must have been awkward, yes. Yeah. But since George Washington's dead 59 years,
yeah.
It definitely would have been awkward George Washington being at Gettysburg.
That's right. Speaking of Gettysburg, the Gettysburg Address, one of the most famous speeches in United States history.
Right.
Did Washington write that for Lincoln, or did Jefferson write it for Lincoln?
I think probably Ben Franklin.
Ben Franklin. Now, see, that wasn't an option I had. I've never heard that. He was a speechwriter?
Ben Franklin?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Then let me segue. We can get back to that if we want. I have a question for you. This is just, for fun. Who was a better president, George Washington or John Adams?
Oh, I'd say probably George Washington because he's the first.
Is there anything else, or just because he was the first?
I think it's hard being the first president and the leader of a country. I think he had to lead by showing, and John Adams, who was one of my favorite people, definitely was one of the better presidents, except for the Sedition Act, which probably George Bush got a little bit from John Adams for that.
George W?
George W.
George Washington.
George W. Bush.
Who is different? George W. Bush. Meaning George Washington. Okay. Thomas Jefferson or Ben Franklin, better president?
Well, it had to be Thomas Jefferson because Ben Franklin was never a president.
Oh, obviously he was a president. I mean,
Ben Franklin? I don't think so.
Well, would you say George W. was a president?
I'm not sure George W. Bush ever should consider him a president.
Exactly.
George Washington.
But he obviously is just like Ben Franklin. You obviously don't think Ben Franklin should have been a president, but the facts say he was, just like George W. Bush is a president. So it's all your own prerogative, I guess.
Right. But what year was Ben Franklin president?
1700s, I guess.
That's really good. The first George. Yeah. What year? 1700s.
Let's see. Must have been early 1700s.
So when we're under British rule.
Could have been.
Right.
Could have been.
So
I think we're missing some facts during that time frame. I mean, obviously, if we're just going by pictures and stuff, it's not going to be as detailed as we have now.
That's true.
They didn't have video and stuff. Now, you mentioned something.
So early 1700s, Ben Franklin probably was about 6 years old.
Not when he was president, but
early 1700s. He was born in 1702.
There you go.
So early 1700s, depending on where you were.
Yeah. You mentioned something I wanted to comment on, though. You said George Washington was the first president, but facts might argue with that. There was something called the Continental Congress.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yep.
And who was the first president of the Continental Congress?
John Hancock.
There we go. So you were wrong when you said George Washington was the first president.
He was the president of the Continental Congress, not the United States.
Okay. John Hancock or George Washington?
John Hancock, president of the Continental Congress.
Now, let's go back. Let's go back to those times, the revolutionary times. The Americans fought the British. There's a lot of bad blood, the Boston Massacre, all this stuff. Now, we've removed ourselves 200 plus years from that time. What's the chance that the British would attack us now?
Could you repeat the question? I was looking out the window.
Remember back in Revolutionary times, just the bad blood between the Americans and British, and the Boston Tea Party, the Boston Massacre, all these things that happened, the war and the separation and the offenses that were made. Now, they've kind of allowed us to just inhabit our land peacefully, so to speak, for 200 plus years. But
The British.
the British have.
Okay.
Without,
That's nice of them.
yes, it's been very nice of them, but it's a little suspicious, if you ask me.
Yeah.
What do you think is to say, have they been mounting their forces and preparing to strike when we least expect it?
I think probably on the Canadian border.
They're going to come down through the Canadian border.
Yeah.
Now, does our U.S. intelligence show support to that kind of a theory?
Well, they just have a law where you had to show some what origin you're from. You go through the border, state, the United States, Canada. So that's why they're checking. Because I think the British are sneaking through Canada.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with the current war we're in now, the war on terrorism, we're being sidetracked. And I think this is a perfect time for if the British were going to strike, because we're so focused on this one group, the terrorists, that we have totally taken our eyes off of Great Britain and the UK, whereas they probably are going to be coming back to claim what was rightfully theirs. Most people would say that our country, the United States of America, was rightfully the British colonies, and they probably are going to be coming back to make us colonies again. Which, would you resist them, or would you be for that?
Why would they want to come to a terrorist nation like us?
To change us.
To change us.
To take us back.
No, they could
to make us better.
To make us better. They can take a current president and leave us here.
Now, who would be who's the current president
Bush.
now? Bush, okay.
Yeah.
George Bush.
Yes.
Okay. Now, speaking of presidents, I was thinking about this earlier. Many presidents have also been generals.
Right.
I can think of three. Is there any others? George Washington, Dwight Eisenhower, and Franklin Roosevelt. Is there any others?
Grant.
Grant.
And take Roosevelt out.
I read a book about Roosevelt fighting certain wars. I think he was a general. Roosevelt, the Rough Riders.
How about Theodore Roosevelt?
Everybody has certain nicknames. I mean, I've heard FDR, I've heard Theodore Roosevelt, I've heard Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. I mean,
Teddy Roosevelt.
sure. But so there's Washington, Eisenhower, FDR, Teddy, whatever, and then Grant.
There's another one in there too.
Andrew Jackson.
Tyler. Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson.
Tyler.
Tyler. John Tyler?
Yeah.
Yep. Now, is it true that John Tyler was actually...
Wait, William Henry Harrison. Sorry, not Tyler.
Not
William Henry Harrison. Tippecanoe and Tyler too.
Now, William Henry Harrison, he committed suicide after 1 month in office. Is that correct?
He was assassinated, I believe, yeah.
Okay.
No, he wasn't.
By himself?
He wasn't. He was not. Tyler never became president. It wasn't William Henry Harrison who was assassinated.
Okay, let's see. Now, tell me about these reenactments that you're involved with. How accurate do you try to make them?
As accurate as possible. My son's more accurate than I am. But I think it's more like talking about history, telling people what really happened.
Okay. So, I mean...
And you should come to one.
Yeah, well, where do you do these?
Because then you know it really happened.
Well, in your mind, I mean, I guess teaches
That's true, in my mind, right.
How many people die when you do these reenactments?
Nobody.
Now, how is that accurate? Because obviously there's many
You
people.
asked me how many would die.
Yeah.
How about we reenact dying?
Do you use real guns?
We use real muskets, but not real bullets.
See, so it's not accurate.
Not accurate.
Okay. Now, would you guys ever be opposed, or would you prefer doing a reenactment of the current war, the war on terrorism?
I wouldn't want to do it, no.
Now, why not?
I like history more than the present.
Okay, okay. So, what about the Civil War?
There are people who do the Civil War.
Yeah.
Why I choose Revolutionary War, that there are actually Revolutionary War battles fought in New England area. There was a Civil War battle fought, and unless there was a Civil War battle, it was fought in St. Albans, Vermont.
Wow.
So Vermont can lay claim to have the only Revolutionary War battle and Civil War battle in the New England states.
Wow, is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So, who is leading the army in that battle?
St. Albans, it was actually Confederates who wanted to rob a bank. And at the end of the war, the St. Albans people invited the Confederates back to become part of the victory parade.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they came back.
Wow, and they didn't fight when they came back?
Yeah, they're all friendly.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow, we're learning a lot of new stuff here. Couple other things. Let's see. And we'll take a call. Let's open up the phone line so we can take a call in a little bit. War of 1812. What were the ramifications of that battle, that war?
The British tried to, it's just an American-British battle again that didn't last very long.
So the British did try again to come back and take over.
And it's more death-dealing sea battles and down. The ironic part was that the Battle of New Orleans, fought by Andrew Jackson, the war ended 2 days before the battle, and people died needlessly. The war was over.
Right.
No one knew.
They kept fighting.
No one knew. Yeah, it took so long. There was no communication, that fast communications back then.
Do we run the risk of that happening with our current battles and current wars?
I hope not.
Hope not. Me too. Did you have any thing you wanted to bring up in particular about United States history? I'll just open the floor for you to talk if you wanted to about different things that you're interested in.
No, I just think that one thing I'm interested in is that since the unit I reenact was under Benedict Arnold, that Benedict Arnold should be considered a hero, because without him we would not have won the Revolutionary War.
Now, you have to explain that. I know there's going to be a lot of people that
Okay, because of
calling about that.
Valcour Island, Burgoyne coming down the first time to try to split the United States and New England states out. In the Battle of Saratoga, which was the turning point of the Revolutionary War, one of the top 10 battles, people and analysts in the world, how they defended Saratoga. He was under house arrest and left and defeated the British at two German and British redoubts. So he actually was the winner he actually was the leader who won the Battle of Saratoga. If we lost Saratoga, we probably would have lost the Revolutionary War. The French wouldn't have come in. Therefore, you can look at it, without Benedict Arnold, we would not have won the Revolutionary War. Now, many people look at that, but you go to Saratoga.
That sounds like blasphemy probably to a lot of people.
Well, you go to Saratoga, you never see his name mentioned. You only see his boot, because he was wounded in the leg.
Okay.
So,
now, are eggs Benedict named after Benedict Arnold?
don't know.
That's a good question.
It is a good question. You look that up next time.
Can we find out? Can our producers find that out for us?
I'll look that up.
Thank you. Now, you reminded me of another person in American history, Stonewall Jackson.
Yes.
Now, what was his significance in the Revolutionary War?
Stonewall Jackson. I don't think he had any significance in the American Revolution.
Again, we might disagree on that, but
you could. Significant was that you talk about the Native Americans, a thing called Trail of Tears, where the Cherokees left Georgia or forced out to Oklahoma, and it was Andrew Jackson who forced them against the Supreme Court's wishes. The Supreme Court said that the Cherokee had to stay in Georgia. Andrew Jackson forced them to leave, and the Trail of Tears, thousands upon thousands died on the way out to Oklahoma. So you could probably say that's what I remember Andrew Jackson about.
Or Stonewall Jackson.
Stonewall Jackson.
Now, here's another question.
Okay.
Stonewall Jackson, he had his arm shot off. Is that the guy?
You're talking about Stonewall Jackson in the Civil War. Okay, yeah, his arm was shot off. I was the wrong president. Andrew Jackson. Stonewall Jackson, yes, has his arm shot off in the Civil War, amputated in the Civil War.
Okay. Now, speaking again of the Civil War, I'm glad we keep going back and forth. I hope our audience can follow us here. And I'm sorry for the confusion between Civil War and Revolutionary War, which, if you saw the beginning of our program, Bob here listed out some of the differences between the two. I know it's confusing, even for me. Maybe it is also for you. But Civil War, fighting South America in the Civil War. Now, how did we attack them down in Ecuador, Brazil, Portugal, all those places down there? What route did we take to attack South America in the Civil War?
Slow boat to China.
A slow boat to China?
Yeah.
Now, what was China's involvement in that war?
Allowed them to use their slow boat.
Okay. Now, down in South America, they still think that they're fighting the Civil War. That's something you said earlier. Couldn't we just maybe carpet bomb the whole place and it'd be done? And that would be the end of any debates?
I suppose some presidents could think that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even a president.
Right.
I mean, if South America is still, fighting the war, so to speak, figuratively, I mean, what's to say we can't just say, okay, well, North America wins once and for all. There you go. What can you say to that? That's just an idea. I'm not saying I'm for or against that. Now, in South America, they talk a different language than us here. Was that at all a problem in the Civil War? The different language barriers?
I don't believe so.
You don't think so? They speak Portugal and Spanish in South America. And
That's probably true.
Yeah. So, let's see. How much time do we have left? Did we find out the answer to that question? You didn't get a chance to read it before the computer crashed? I don't believe you.
But I had hit back in my classroom, though, so
Okay.
I think we need to end this interview.
Okay. Well, it was great to talk to you. I'd like to have you on the program again. True American history expert here. No, I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about Bob here. Well, both of us, I guess. Well, thank you for joining us this week on I Know Lots. It's been great. If you have any questions or comments, just email iknowlots@hotmail.com.